My kids were young when I left their mother. She decided that she preferred the company of another man to mine. I was heartbroken and humiliated, but I dealt fairly with the divorce. My alimony and child support were set, and I never missed one payment or a chance to spend time with my kids. Beyond our scheduled time together, I did all the dad stuff. I came to see them perform in school plays and play sports. If they wanted to talk, I made myself available. I never spoke about their mother other than to say she was a good mom and they were lucky to have her. When she remarried, my alimony ended, but obviously not the child support. She had another kid with her husband. When my kids were 18 and 17, their mom was diagnosed with cancer. He left because of the debts, and he couldn't care for her. I don't really know more than that. She didn't make it 5 years. I felt bad at the time, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. I had just become engaged to my fiancé. I sent my kids an invitation to my wedding. It was just small in my backyard. They both said that they would not attend, and I was heartless for getting married just 2 months after their mom died. I said I understood their grief and I hoped they changed their minds, and then I dropped it. I got married on Saturday and my kids found out. They called me and said I was an idiot for not postponing my wedding, or at least calling to ask them to come. I just said that they knew the time and place, and I would have made room for them and had food if they had shown up. They were both angry at me, but I don't think I'm wrong for not changing my plans over the death of a woman I divorced over a decade ago. Edit. The invitations went out 4 months before the wedding. We planned the wedding to take place over the winter break, so my kids and my new wife's children could attend. So we saw the kids at Thanksgiving, and we cried together over their mother. They sent their RSVP just a few days after their mom passed away. Not the idiot. The wedding was planned, and invites were sent out before she died. You've been divorced for more than a decade. You invited them formally. They declined. I get that they're kids and they've just lost their mother, which is a horrible loss, but you've done nothing wrong here. I don't understand why they expected you to interpret their no RSVPs as a please come beg us to come anyway. You're not psychic. I also don't understand why they found out you got married on the date listed on the invitation that they clearly read and responded to. They already knew because you told them. I don't think they expected OP to beg. I think they expected OP to move the wedding date to a later date that wasn't so soon to their mom's death date. OP's thinking in terms of logic, rights, and responsibilities, and he's sure he's technically in the clear with what he did. But I'm sorry, if you make children with someone, it's never that cut and dried. Did he talk to his kids at all? Was he there for them in their grief? He should have postponed the wedding. Disagree. The grief would not have passed in 2 or 4 months too. So if OP had tried contacting them to get them to reconsider, then he would have been considered the most insensitive, heartless, cruel person by the sons. How could he ask us to consider attending the wedding when we had just attended Mom's funeral? OP, you didn't do anything wrong. They may just be looking for someone to blame. I hope it'll pass and that they come to their senses. Agree. You didn't purposely get married 2 months after their mother died to hurt anyone. I also don't think that they're idiots for being hurt and grieving. I just think they're taking their pain out on you, which isn't fair, but I don't think it makes them idiots. You clearly didn't set out to hurt them. This whole situation just hurts. They need to find a way to work through the pain. Congrats on the wedding and marriage. Everyone deserves happiness. I am the oldest of my parents' 8 children, all toddlers to teens, and I'm 23. My biological father died 2 months after I was born, and my father, stepfather, has been present in my life since I was 3 years old. The house I currently live in belonged to my paternal grandfather, who, when he died, as he had no wife and children, my biological father was an only child, made me the sole heir of his things. He passed away when I was 15. As the house was quite big, 7 bedrooms, 4 baths, my parents talked to me about our family moving there, as it would be cheaper and accommodate everyone. The only thing I wanted was the master suite for myself, and it actually became my bedroom. Currently, my mother is 6 months pregnant, again. I work and earn a good salary. I don't pay the house bills, but I help with groceries. This month, I started having complaints from my parents, saying that I should help more with my younger brothers. I always argue that I'm not their father and that it's their responsibility. They were so financially tight and started to charge me to pay some bills because they were unable to, and I began to pay some, but not as they wanted. I hit my limit when they suggested I move into their room, as they would need the space for the new baby, and they pay most of the bills, so they should have the biggest room. I told them they could pay most of the bills, but they don't pay a dime on a huge house, and it's only in my name. And if they want more space for their 9th child, I suggest they move to another house, because I am the owner of the house, and I won't give up my comfort because they don't stop having children. They started calling me an ungrateful son and saying that they raised me to be empathetic and kind, but I'm showing myself to be a cold and extremely selfish person who threatens their own parents to take them out of the house, and for not agreeing with the suggestion. I talked to my maternal grandmother, and she said that she understood my side, but that I may have been very hard on them, especially since they're my parents. They're not talking to me currently, by the way. Am I the idiot? Edit. Obviously, I'm not able to support the house on my own, but it's a great house for rent, and only with it could I rent a smaller house and live on that money alone. For the yearly fees, my grandfather left a reasonable accountant to pay them with some money left. So no, they don't put money in the house, besides the bills and anything they break. It's not forever, but my grandfather protected me financially until I at least had the capacity and maturity to do so. Not the idiot. They've got some nerve even asking that of you. It blows my mind when people pop out almost an entire football team worth of kids and then make it other people's problem. Honestly, if you can't afford to keep having kids, stop having kids. If your parents can't afford to house and feed their 9 children on their own, then they should stop having kids. Their demands are also presumptuous. They will soon take over the house. And what about if you want to get married and have your own kids? I would sit down with them and establish a timeline of how they intend to manage their lives independently of you, and make it clear that you will not be financially responsible for them, your siblings, or give up your bedroom. Your grandfather was one smart guy. If they want more room, then they can pay the market rate for rent. And like OP said, OP can move to a smaller place, but OP needs to realize that with the new kid, they're planning on staying at least 18 more years. OP, read that again. 18 more years. Doesn't matter if you get married or have a family. No spouse is going to want to put up with that BS. I, male 21, am disabled, a full-time wheelchair user, and live in a fairly small college town with a couple of friends. My roommates and I are part of a larger friend group of 8 people, and we're all pretty close. I really love my roommates. They're great, but sometimes a little thick. There's one person in the large friend group, let's call him Chris, who's dating a guy. Let's call him James. I really don't like James for many reasons, mostly petty ones, to be honest. But another fact, James is a vegetarian. That's not a problem in itself, but herein comes the issue. All of us planned on getting dinner on New Year's Eve. In a smallish college town, there are 3 main restaurants to choose from that are open nearby. One of them is a steakhouse, one of them is a Thai place, and one of them is a sort of hippie plant-based place. James immediately suggests the plant-based one. I give a veto as it's completely inaccessible, and give the alternative of ordering takeout from there and bringing it back to my place. But we recently started fostering a cat, and one of our other friends is allergic, so that's also a no-go. None of the other friends are able to host a gathering for various reasons, so I suggest we go to the Thai place. It's a nice spot and reasonably accessible, but apparently James and Chris went to the Thai place last week for their anniversary and didn't want to go back. I then suggest the steakhouse, but of course that's loudly shut down because James is a vegetarian. Long story short, the group did vote between the hippie place and the Thai place, not even including the steakhouse, and the plant-based place won. I admitted that I was slightly frustrated with my roommates, who said we could only bring food back afterward. I said that this wasn't an issue, but sure. So New Year's Eve comes, and they get back from dinner, and James and Chris also stop by. At this point, it's pretty late and I'm a couple of drinks in, and I flat out tell James that I think it's crappy that he suggested and then subsequently campaigned for a place that he knows I can't go to. He said that it was fair because I suggested the steakhouse, knowing he's a vegetarian. I told him that it was different because he could have, at the very least, physically been present. He insisted that it was the same, and I asked him to leave the apartment because I was just tired of dealing with his BS. So he left, and my roommates think I overreacted. Maybe I did. What do y'all think? Not the idiot. It isn't the same. They could put up with eating at the same restaurant twice in 7 days. You cannot change whether a restaurant is accessible. You gave plenty of options, and they specifically chose the one that directly excluded you. As a vegetarian, if I was asked to choose between a place one of the group couldn't physically access and somewhere that I went last week for an anniversary, I'd choose the one from last week. If I was asked to choose between the steakhouse and the vegan place one of the group couldn't physically access, I'd still choose the steakhouse and order fries or something. I couldn't happily munch down on my veggie plate, knowing someone had to miss out due to a physical inability to access the premises. And anyone who voted that way is not a great friend. Exactly. Your friends aren't your friends. Who chooses to leave someone out rather than eat at the same place twice? OP, think long and hard about continuing your friendship with all of these idiots. Being vegetarian for the most part is a choice. Being in a wheelchair isn't. It's not rocket science. My daughter, Day, 18, is naturally very smart, but also very lazy. We live in New Zealand, where you do 3 years worth of exams. In the first 2 years, she excelled excellently and was in the top 5% of her year group. This year, however, I got an email that she didn't pass the year, let alone get university entrance, 2 different sets of requirements. This means that entry into her course and halls of residence has been revoked. I am obviously furious and disappointed in her. She would now be considered in the bottom 5% of her school. We were at our family friends a couple of days ago, where all the teens who had just finished high school were discussing their future plans. Day mentioned how she was going to take a couple years off from school, where she wanted to continue working to become more independent, and then be a camp counselor, Camp America, for the summer, where she went on about confidence and all that BS. That was when I piped in. I said that Day was only taking 2 years off, and she didn't actually pass high school, and therefore couldn't go to university. I then stated how the mentioning of 2 years was manipulatively stated, as a 2-year wait would allow her to go to university through adult entry, despite failing high school, and was therefore not a choice she made. I then looked at the younger kids in the room and made mention how this would be them if they don't get their act together, and continued on Day's path of being a pathetic, disorganized, and ungrateful teenager. Day started crying, which she never does. So I felt a little bad, but then realized she brought this on herself. As a final statement on the topic, I said that she can't just lie to everyone about her future plans because she's embarrassed by the consequences of her own actions. If she didn't want to be embarrassed, she shouldn't have ended up in this situation. I got a message from one of the parents last night asking if Day wanted to go away for a week with their family. She said that Day seemed like she needed a break, and she especially noticed it after the exam results. Day hasn't spoken to me since she got her results, and I can barely look at her without feeling so angry. So, of course, I agreed. When she came to pick her up, however, she dared to say I needed to let it go and think about if it was the right decision to share her personal information with the others. She said she was ashamed on my behalf before abruptly leaving. I don't believe I did anything wrong, as it was wrong of Day to lie about the reasons behind her future plans, but she needs to own up to it. However, the comment from the other parent took me by surprise. I do think about her well-being. My husband passed away 5 years ago, so if he passed away during this year, I would have understood, but he didn't. It's laziness that got her here. No other external factors. So, am I the idiot? You are the idiot. A sudden decline in her performance? Like, that's a signal that something is wrong. A high-performing teenager does not suddenly become lazy, and failing exams as a previously high-performing student must feel horrible. There are so many signs here that your daughter needs support and understanding, and you've reacted with anger, humiliated her, and called her pathetic. Plus, her decision to work for the next 2 years to build up her independence and confidence is a totally valid, smart choice. This is her life, not yours, and you need to act like you're on her side, or you will lose her. I'm glad her friends' parents are acting like rational adults. Your daughter failed high school? Where were you? Aren't you the parent? Weren't you contacted? What actions did you take to correct this path? This is your failure too. Your child is just that, a child. Maybe one that's almost grown, but you're still responsible for them. Embarrassing them in front of their peers like that did nothing to help your child rebound from this. And they're going to need to, because what's done is done, and they're trying to find a path forward, and you just crushed them doing what you did. My goodness, her dad died, making you her sole parent. Doubly, you are the idiot for not having a clue about what's going on with your child as her sole remaining emotional support. This is just sad. If anything, the fact that you were blindsided by this, instead of knowing how on track she was to fail, shows a failure in you. Also, that parent is right. That's her personal information, and you had no right to share it. I'm female 34, a native Anglophone from Australia, but I live in France and speak French in my daily life. I have a French husband, 31, and we have a daughter, pre-K, together. Our daughter only speaks French. I didn't teach her English because it would have been difficult teaching her, especially when everyone around her speaks French, and my husband and I speak French to each other. I didn't think this was a problem since we live in France, and if she wants to learn English, she can when she goes to school. We, my husband, daughter, and me, went to Australia for Christmas and New Year. This is the first time my daughter's been to Australia or met my family. When we were there, multiple family members were surprised and annoyed by the fact that my daughter didn't speak English and couldn't speak to them. My mom even had a conversation with me about it and told me my daughter wouldn't get anywhere in life without learning English. Silly, because she literally lives in France and is surrounded by French speakers, and she'll learn English in school anyway. Said it was bad she couldn't communicate with her family, and even compared it to child abuse. I wouldn't have thought it was that controversial to only teach French to a child who lives in France. Most of my family are still upset with me and say I'm depriving her of English and that she needs to learn it. But my husband says it's reasonable for a child in France to only speak French and that trying to make her learn English will confuse her. So, am I the idiot? You are the idiot. As a half Italian, half English guy raised in England, I wish my parents had taught me Italian growing up. By the time I was learning foreign language in school, I was already having trouble with them that I wouldn't have had being raised in a bilingual environment. You chose to take your daughter to Australia, where you knew her family didn't speak French, and you put her in a situation where she's isolated from her relatives. Why would it confuse the child? Loads of kids grow up in multilingual homes, learning to speak more than one language. No harm in knowing more than one language. It would be fine if you had never planned to travel to Australia and never wanted a relationship with your family there, but that's not what you're doing. You're basically isolating her from the rest of the family. And opportunities? Most of the working world speaks English. How can she possibly be so short-sighted as to not teach her daughter a language that'll open hundreds of doors for her? Unfortunately, learning it in school is different. OP, you've messed up properly here. Stop being lazy and get on with it. If your husband has a tantrum, that's your problem, not your daughter's. Don't let his prejudice hold her back.